Modern health culture is increasingly defined by the quantified self. Consumer technology has normalized the continuous tracking of our own biology, turning diet, sleep, and physical activity into data points to be optimized. But this cultural drive for optimization has a clinical endpoint, a condition known as orthorexia nervosa. Orthorexia nervosa manifests as an obsessive fixation on food quality and purity. It involves rigid behaviors around preparation and selection that mirror the psychopathology of both anorexia and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Researchers identify this pathology using the Orto-15 assessment. This scale quantifies dietary habits, where lower scores indicate orthorexic traits. A score below 35 separates the clinical cohort. In a sample of 63 students, this threshold identified orthorexia in 38.10%. Despite its prevalence, orthorexia remains a significant diagnostic blind spot for healthcare professionals. This is because the condition is ego-syntonic. The patient believes their rigid behavior is beneficial and correct, rather than a symptom of a disorder. Because the patient projects an image of health and control, practitioners routinely underestimate the actual physical toll the condition takes on the body. A 2025 case control study in the journal Nutrients challenges this perception by investigating the gap between the patient's self-reporting and their physical data. The findings reveal a dissociation between the mind and the body. In these subjects, a subjective sense of well-being masks an autonomic nervous system trapped in chronic hyperarousal. To understand this dissociation, we have to look past the patient's claims and analyze their hard physical data. Comparing Predimed scores, measuring Mediterranean diet adherence, shows no statistical difference between the orthorexia cohort and the healthy control group. Mapping these scores against body mass index reveals a paradox. The orthorexia cohort presents a significantly higher BMI, averaging 24.90 against 22.61. There is a clear contradiction here. The patient enforces punishing dietary rules, yet their physical baseline is less optimal than those not tracking their food at all. A cognitive fixation on health does not automatically produce anthropometric health. This suggests a systemic failure in the body's internal regulation. If the body is struggling, why isn't the patient reporting distress to their clinician? These are the results of the Symptom Checklist 90 revised. On these subjective intake forms, reporting for anxiety and depression in the orthorexia group is statistically identical to healthy controls. Even obsession, compulsion, and somatization rows remain flat. On paper, the patient perceives no psychological distress. Their conscious experience is one of perfect mental health. This creates a subjective facade. The ego-syntonic nature of the disorder prevents the patient from recognizing the pathology of their own behavior. These results prove that standard subjective intake forms are an insufficient tool for diagnosing orthorexia. To find the true source of the problem, clinicians must use targeted questioning that bypasses the patient's subjective perception. The Eating Disorder Inventory 3 reveals the first behavioral leak. A statistically significant spike appears on the axis of cognitive overcontrol. Simultaneously, the data shows a secondary spike in emotional dysregulation. These two markers suggest a mechanical relationship. The overcontrol of food is a reaction to internal emotional instability. The subjects appear to use dietary hypercontrol as a maladaptive strategy to manage their underlying emotional distress. Because this strategy is maladaptive, it cannot fully resolve the internal pressure. The emotional dysregulation is simply displaced into the physiological baseline. This physiological displacement is visible in the psychophysiological stress profile. Even at rest, the cohort's imbalanced heart rate variability indicates a system constantly prepared for threat. When a cognitive stressor is introduced, the system's fragility is exposed. Skin conductance violently arcs upward, showing an extreme sympathetic reaction beyond normal parameters. Simultaneously, cardiac regulation fails, compressing into a rapid tachycardia spike. Crucially, once the stressor is removed, physical metrics remain elevated. To manage this sustained panic, vagal tone attempts to hypercompensate, fighting to pull the heart rhythm down against a rigid baseline. The autonomic nervous system is trapped in a state of sustained conflict, where the signal for rest is overridden by a persistent state of hyperarousal. This physical state mirrors the emotional dysregulation identified earlier. A nervous system that cannot regulate its response to stress is a system prone to the metabolic compensations that drive weight gain. While the patient believes their body is at its peak, their autonomic nervous system records the continuous physical cost of their obsession. Orthorexia nervosa is defined by this internal paradox. As cognitive hypercontrol increases, subjective distress remains flat, while autonomic arousal rises. Dietary fixation blocks conscious distress, displacing it to the physiological baseline. This chronic hyperarousal explains the elevated BMI. Unmanaged stress triggers involuntary metabolic responses, or emotional eating, to self-regulate. The clinical imperative is to move beyond the patient self-reporting. We cannot rely on the testimony of a mind that is actively masking its own distress. To treat orthorexia, we must bypass the illusion of health and directly measure the objective trauma recorded in the autonomic nervous system.